Okay, welcome to part 3 here as we wrap up now the new features and enhancements to the market structure indicator. 3 additional features here that we haven't covered in the prior 2 videos. Now, just in the interest of variety here, I've switched over to crude. I've switched to a tick chart, it's a 512 tick chart. Wouldn't matter if it was time, tick, volume, right? Same thing. It would be applied the same way. So whatever your preference is, you can apply the market structure to it. Now, the 3 that we have yet to discuss that are enhancements, let's go through them one at a time. First is trend line liquidity. So let me turn that on. So what it's going to do here is just look for, essentially it's connecting fractals, looking for areas where we can anticipate that very likely there are going to be stops here at some of these pivots, whether it's here, 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 here. All of these are logical locations where, in this case, as the market is rallying up to these highs, we can anticipate that stops are being trailed underneath. So as the market is constantly looking for liquidity, these are obvious locations where you might anticipate a little retrace or a push here being a kind of a pump up at the end of the day. These little swing structure here to where you can anticipate that this is liquidity being picked up as the stops that are underneath this run here are being swept. So you'll see this, up, down. Let's see here. Well, here's a couple of good ones here. So here's a decent one here. Again, the time is really not relevant. So reasonable to anticipate that under these pivots here, you have stops being placed here. So as the market swings down here, grabbing some of that liquidity here, you can anticipate that if we start to head back the other direction, that's a reasonable estimate of what likely happened there. And then you see the same thing here as the market is coming down, stops likely locations here where we can anticipate that. So it's another location where you might anticipate looking for, whether it's traders or algos, right? They're always looking for liquidity here. Where might we see that? And again, it'll just keep going here. I think it. As we look here, once it's been swept entirely, it'll take it off. But these are just decent examples here. So here, this liquidity gets swept. This liquidity gets swept here. That's the end of the day. This liquidity getting partially swept here. So that's the thinking behind this. So it's just one other location to be looking for liquidity grabs that just to draw your attention to it. Now the other, let me just keep going here, is I'm going to take that off so as not to distract, is equal highs and equal lows. It's the same idea in that these can be areas where you want to anticipate potential, right? It's always just potential for these to be liquidity grabs here. And you can see now it's not always exactly equal. It's just we want to be close, right? So this here, it actually looks like a trend line here. We've got, they're not, double tops, but these are areas of liquidity where you might anticipate if it's something like this, where you can kind of see what happened here, that this is a liquidity being grabbed up here before the market comes down. And we see this repeatedly. Let's see if I can find it. Well, that's going to the end of the day. Let's see if I can find a few more. They do. Here's another one here where we have equal highs, where potentially what's happened there as we look at it. This swing here off of that, grabbing some of that liquidity before it goes down, then back up. Let's see if I've got any. Here's equal low. Again, they're not double bottoms, right? In this case, right? They're not exactly equal, and there's a variable you can adjust based on how close you want them to be. Do you want them to? You could truly make them double bottoms, double tops, but I think a little bit of variance here is worthwhile, so that you're just looking for those locations where you want to be alerted to the fact that, hey, that's potentially a liquidity grab up here as we see these areas being visited here and often swept, and then the market going the other direction. So again, use it, don't use it. It's entirely up to you. I think it's useful, and I would not want to ignore it. Here's, I pull that out of there. I would not want to ignore it as a potential area for liquidity as the market is constantly seeking its next liquidity grab to find the fuel it needs to continue, whether it's moving higher or lower, carrying on in the trend or reversing the trend. So that one is, again, just another enhancement here that's available to you. And it's just as with everything else in the drop-down menu, you can turn them on, turn them off. well, that's fractals on or off. Equal highs, equal lows. I can turn these on. Typically, I would encourage you to have them all on, right? There's no reason, well, let me just rephrase that by saying that that's how I interpret these. I want them on all the time, so I don't want to miss something that, if I had identified this as a potential area for equal highs, equal lows here, that this might be something I wouldn't want to miss. So those are all additions. And then finally, the last one here is related to our supply and demand zones. Now, we use the language here a little bit differently than others that have software or teach this. We identify order blocks, and we make a distinction between order blocks and supply and demand zones. So while some people might consider what we're calling supply and demand zones as order blocks here, we make a distinction because we think they're two different things. So for supply and demand zones here, as I have it currently set, I have this set to only be looking for supply or demand that are attached to breaks of structure. Now, it can be on changes of character, it can be on both, but I think the default will come as a break of structure, and I think that that's a good starting point. So if I turn those on now and then recalculate here, let's see if I can get over to the right here. Now, let's see, pretty much everything else has already been taken out. So here, as I have it currently, this is the only one that's active here. This was supply right at the end of the day. Now, let me go back into the menu here. And if I take, noting here that I'm in supply and demand zones here, and I want to hide the broken zones here, I have that activated. If I turn that off, well, now I'm going to see all of the supply and demand zones that have been tapped into. Now, this is a good example here just to draw your attention to. In the supply and demand zones here, we give you the capability of deciding when they have been mitigated here. So in this case here, and this is how I will typically to use it, if we break the premium discount zone of the in this case the supply zone here, if we go above the 50% of that range, then the software will, if you have it set this way, will declare this as a mitigated supply zone. Same thing here. Once we get into the premium, it's just going to stop drawing it, is what it's going to do. So the idea being this is now mitigated, so it wouldn't have the same impact if it were revisited a second time. Now, there are times where a second tap where you'll get a reaction as well. But just for our purposes of identifying, and that might be an instance of where you would want to keep these on rather than to hide them. Because here, of course, in this case, if I hide them, well, everything that's been mitigated is off, and we end up with only the very last one on. So I reference that in the context of taking you to the next addition, which requires that the broken ones be left on. So that is the breaker block. Right now, a breaker block is simply a supply or a demand zone here. These are often called flip zones, where it has flipped from potentially, where's a good one here? From a potential supply zone here to a demand zone here as a result of the flip. So, well, here's a small one here. This was supply tapped into. It's mitigated, and then it becomes demand. Let's see if I can find a better one. This is it's kind of a lot of overlap there. Let's see if here this is a decent one. Right, so as the market is coming up here, let's see if I can draw it this way here. So the market is coming up. This is supply. We've had a break of structure. This would be supply as a result of that break of structure here. Now note we're tapping into a prior supply zone as well. But as this is mitigated here, this now in turn, right, it was supply. The market goes through it. Now as it comes back to it, we get right to that premium discount zone here, and now it's converted into a flip zone or a breaker block, as it's often called. And here we don't actually break the low here, but we do break into the discount, so that's why it doesn't continue to draw it here. It breaks just like the others break. Same thing here. It's supply because here's the break of structure. It's not respected by the market. The market continues to move higher. We retrace. Now that prior supply becomes demand, and off we go. Let's see if I've got another couple of good ones. Oh, this is a great one here. So here's a break of structure here. So thus after the break of structure, we have potential supply here. The market obviously carries on, and as we come all the way back down to it, this prior supply zone now flips to a a breaker block or a demand zone here. Color coding is what you would use here to help identify. But that's why when you're looking at these, you need to have the supply demand, the notation here to hide the broken. You have to have that turned off, or pardon me, it has to be turned off for the breaker blocks to show. If I turn them on, well, they're not going to show because they've all been mitigated. So to see the breaker blocks when you're trading, you need to keep these off, right? And then your choice is whether you want the breaker blocks on or not. All right, again, take a look here, right? This can be a lot on your chart. Do you want that much on your chart? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Again, the point here is that we're giving you these options. Do you want the trend line liquidity? Do you want the equal highs and lows? Do you want the breaker blocks? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just a function of giving you additional features here so that you can decide whether or not these are important enough for you to keep them on your chart. Right? Interesting ideas here, and you'll see often you can be reaction rather than as we just looked at that one spectacular example here where it was just right to it here, where you're going to pivot right at it. Right here's a great example of it. This is not bad as well. Again, this is all supply. We come back down, we flip now to a demand zone here, up we go. Here's another decent example here. It was supply, comes down, now it's a breaker block or a flip zone here, and we get a reaction the other direction. It doesn't lead to a trend change, but we do get, I mean, there's a decent reaction there. What do you got? You know, there's 28 ticks coming off of this breaker block here. Note there's a change of character as well, and then we get a major break of structure here as the market comes down and works its way into this converted flip zone or breaker block. That's the language that it's used interchangeably, whether it's breaker block or flip zone. We're just using breaker block here. I think many people are familiar with that, but it's the same concept here. We're flipping from supply to demand. All right, so that I think covers all of the new features that have been built into this. Everything else was in the prior version, or we've subtly enhanced it as we've done here with the swing structure here. Some of the things that are new also show the fractals, right? That may or may not be relevant depending on whether you're using fractal based or not. Oh, this is all the same from the prior version. Again, swing high and low, the strong high and low, the internal structure. That's all holdover from the prior version. Those are all very important here. It's up to you as to whether or not you want to have lower high, higher low, right? It can be helpful, right? Particularly when you're first learning this. So we get a lower high with a fractal here. So we have a hanging fractal here, right? Will it get tapped into? Well, it looks like it wasn't enough here, but it was a swing here that led to a break of structure here. It looks like there's a little change of character or a little supply zone there as well. Now we tap this demand and off we go. Then here's another one that is disrespected, but then it's broken on both sides. So it was supply. The market goes through, but then it comes back down. So there would have been a flip zone here, but it's not respected. And then we come down here and then off we go again. So again, these are not a requirement. It's more just additional features that are available to you as to whether or not you want to turn them all on or none of them on. Entirely up to you. Okay, that's it for part 3. I think that covers all the new features. So in the additional videos that will be coming, it'll be more applications, trade examples here that we can show you.